Hello everybody, my name is Tony and you're listening to this new and exciting new show called Your Rights. I welcome you all to this new show. I'm absolutely honoured and delighted to actually be here today. Just in relation to Your Rights, what it really is, listeners, is it is giving you a platform and a voice to share your own story about your experience in Ireland as a citizen, in relation to human rights in general. I mean, a lot of people say they understand human rights, but really there are many aspects to it. We've got our fundamental human rights, we've got our constitutional rights. So really, this show is going to help, give you a chance to, or give our guests an opportunity and for you to listen to their stories. They're really personal stories, some of these. And our first guest, who I'll introduce in a moment, really epitomises that. Moving forward then, it's also going to give you an opportunity to educate yourself about what human rights is all about. So without further ado, I'm honoured to have Patrick Clohessy, Pat Clohessy as he's known to many. Pat has a fantastic background. He's got a legal brain that actually outdoes most barristers and solicitors that I've actually ever come across. I've seen him in action. Many people have seen him in action in the courts. He's a real person. He's a real one of the people. And he has also on a very sad side, he's got a very harrowing story, which really epitomises his own personal experience of human rights, and how it's respected or not respected, more appropriately in this country. Now, obviously, the show itself is not going to overstep any boundaries. It's not going to overstep any legal boundaries. This is really just giving our guests an opportunity to share their story, to educate you, the listeners, in relation to human rights. So I'll start by introducing Pat. Very welcome to you, Pat. Thank you for being here today.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me.
Pat, I know your story. I know on a human basis and on a legal basis, you know, you've got some serious story to tell, and I'm honoured, as I said, delighted that you're here to do that. But just before we begin and explain what you understand about human rights, your own experience of it, in terms of your story, and how you feel it impacts, you know, the general public and every Irish citizen. Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, your background? You've clearly got an Irish heritage there.
Yeah, I was born in Hartford, Connecticut, in the ghetto in 1952. Both my parents were Irish immigrants that came to the USA after World War II. My father emigrated to the United States in 1946. He was in Scotland and London, during the bombing. He was a West Clare man, born on the shores of the Shannon. One of a family of 11 children, living in a very small farm. Lovely place, but obviously it couldn't support 11 children.
That'd be difficult.
Yeah, and like everyone from every family from West Clare, and in fact all over Ireland, right here in Dublin, there's so many families have immigrated all over the world, but particularly to North America, the U.S. and Canada. My mother, believe it or not, emigrated to the United States before my father.
Wow.
She was the first one when emigration opened in 1945 to, I suppose you could call, sign up.
She was the first one on the queue.
Yeah, and she really didn't even tell much of her friends that she was going. She
jumped ship.
She went. She told me she went to the regatta in Cove on the 15th of August, and then after that she was on the boat. So she landed over there all by herself, solo.
And look, now you're here.
Yeah. So she was from East Cork, a place called Parish of Lisgould, and she's one of a family of 6 children. Their life was difficult too because during the war and prior to the War of Independence, my grandmother and grandfather were sent down to Glen by the Black and Tans, fired shots. My mother was kept home in the 4th class, so she had to take care of the family, and she made her a very strong woman, and she's still alive at 97 years, albeit that she's at this moment a political prisoner, which is hard to believe in Ireland. So
I wouldn't say she'd be too happy to have heard then certain things that's actually been planned,
Yeah,
but we won't get into that just now. Just to elaborate.
Yeah, I was first brought to Ireland at 2 years of age, and unfortunately, my parents, because of work situation, they returned to the U.S. and then they tried it again when I was 8 years of age to settle. But the working conditions weren't suitable. But even that you're born of Irish parentage at that time, and I suppose it still is now with immigrants. Your earliest memories are of the great camaraderie of the Irish immigrant community. On a Sunday with hurling and football, and people from the Gaeltacht. Speaking Irish, traditional Irish music and dancing and so on. My family were not really that much interested in drinking alcohol or anything, so it was a lot of sports and music and dancing and all.
Right, fantastic.
So.
And tell me, just you've got your own family then, your own children.
Yeah. I came here basically at 11 years of age, and I'll just get into this, in 1963, and I went to the Christian Brothers School, and then they returned again in 95 to the USA, and then I attended a Holy Cross Brothers School there for the other part of my secondary education, and back here again in 1967 to the Presentation Brothers in Cork, and then I did my final year over in the USA again in 1969, and came here to live full time in 1970. And so I was married, and we had twin children, and they didn't survive.
Sorry.
Yeah. So, but we then my wife and I decided to move to the U.S. in 1979. And we had 2 sons born there. Unfortunately, one of my sons was killed over there, Brendan. And so we brought him back here to be buried with his brother and sister. And
do you mind me asking what happened there?
Yeah, a reckless driver, basically an auxiliary. It's hard to believe, an undercover policeman. Dragged him along with his car from a crosswalk. But anyways, my youngest son is now in education. He lives in the Midlands, and I've become a grandfather since the 10th of December.
Congratulations.
Grandson.
Congratulations. About time. Since about time. And tell me, just you're being, as I introduced you earlier on, you are definitely one of the people, and you started and ran your own business here in Ireland.
Yeah, in 1994, I started a small wooden ladder manufacturing business, and I named it in honor of my son, who was killed.
Beautiful.
Brendan Industries.
Oh, what a beautiful thing to do,
we ship ladders all over Ireland, and we've shipped them all over the UK and into France. But, of course, with the economy, things have gone down, and it's been...
I know, but it shows, You've stuck at it, and you have your own factory in Cork, is it?
Yeah, it's a small little factory employee, and my idea was to do something locally, to employ local people in a kind of a rural type setting,
Okay, this kind of leads us in sooner than I expected there, because I mean you've got a real story, and my sympathies are really with you, Pat, with the tragedies that you've experienced. But it just goes to show that you've seen the good, the bad, and many other aspects of life.
Unfortunately, it was my turn that time, but someone's turn every day.
I know, but it doesn't.
You don't realize the impact of it until it comes to your door.
Absolutely. Now, you've obviously, so you've seen the great thing about you, Pat, as well as in relation to your experiences and this show, as I said, we staying focused on it. It's to provide a platform, as I said, for people like you and for our listeners to learn and hear these stories about your experience of what human rights means. I suppose, can you compare, or is there any comparison between what you experienced in America to Ireland in terms of what you think human rights is all about, and how is it viewed by the public?
Well, of course, I'm a great respecter of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
What is that, Pat?
That was brought about by the UN in 1945, and our own Constitution here, the 1937 Constitution, is a fantastic document in terms of human rights. A lot of people don't know that, but I have become very much involved in the court system and defending people. So I have I was actually mentored and tutored by a former judge and senior counsel in the UK, and from that experience, which resulted as me being wrongfully sued and having to get other third opinions. I then took this on board after my mentoring, that I decided that I would help people, because I realized, I'm affected, but there's a lot more people that are affected and don't know that their human rights are being violated every day right here in the courts in Ireland, even that we have a great, fantastic constitution. But, and even that we have signed up to the Declaration, there is a lot more needs to be done. And in fact, I myself have filed a complaint with the Human Rights Commission in Geneva, the High Commissioner for Human Rights, in relation to a good friend of mine whose mother passed away. And in fact, it is your own mother, Olive, which was a tragic thing. And as a result of that, I started an organization, the Irish People's Citizens Alliance for Change.
Can I just, sorry, because these are all very, very relevant. But again, just because it's the first show, I want to try and bring it back to its bare bones in terms of, okay, I'll tell you, when people on the street and people I meet, you ask them what are your human rights, they may be able to answer a few things. Well, we have a human right to freedom, we have a human right to an education, things like that. But what do you feel? Do you feel there's a serious lack of understanding of human rights in this country?
Yeah, I would say people don't really realize that they possess very, very, very precious personal fundamental rights that are sovereign to the people themselves.
What do you mean by sovereign to the people?
Sovereign means you yourself own those rights. Just like in our Constitution, we, the sovereign people, have the final say, right? We, the sovereign people, under Article 40 of our Constitution, which deals with personal fundamental rights, have great fundamental rights. And people don't realize how precious this is and how much it should be valued. Because at the moment, in this present climate that we're in this country, and with this present government, which everyone is dissatisfied with, they're operating more or less like a fascist dictatorship. And when I said in the beginning that I had a great respect for the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. That came about as a result of World War II and the atrocities that the Nazis carried out against the Jewish people. Okay, I'm going to compare this to some of the situations that are going on here at the present moment with homeless people, evictions, and there's a number of issues which people don't realize. We really have a human right there that is very strong to protest about this, to speak out about it, and we have the final say to assert those fundamental rights. But we have to join together. The people must join together and say, bring an alliance about for change, because what has happened is we have slipped into what I call a pre-fascism dictatorship era in this country, whereby this government, which I call their government to themselves, are abusing our fundamental rights every day. The biggest abuse is 852,000 people on waiting lists.
Just let me jump in, because you talk about the government, and one of the things that's fascinated a lot of people because obviously I know a lot of what you're talking about, but getting back to the brass tacks, is it true to say that if we can imagine the food pyramid, because I understand
right.
nutrition, that really the food pyramid should be turned upside down. So is it true to say that the pyramid, in terms of the hierarchy about what our rights are, you have God, you have man and woman, you have the Constitution, and then underneath that is the government and all the servants. So they are our servants, is that correct? Or what way should it be?
Yeah, the way it is under the Constitution, the Irish Constitution is a great constitution, a plebiscite constitution voted on by the people in 1936.
And people wouldn't understand the word plebiscite now.
Yeah, plebiscite means the people.
Okay.
The people.
Okay.
The people.
Okay.
Right? The citizens' people voted on this. Plebiscite comes from the earliest word from the Greeks. The Greeks, the plebs, said to their masters, we have a right to know, right? So from that right to know, their masters were the patricians. A lot of people have heard this word maybe in school, in the Bible, right? What's happened at the present moment is we, the people, who have voted on this Constitution, the plebs, the plebiscite, voted this in, are sovereign. Our rights are far superior to what is known as the state. The Irish state is only in second place in regards to the sovereignty. The people's sovereignty is number one. Okay. The state is number two in sovereignty in dealing with the EU and with external relations in the state. But what has happened is the state, which I consider now to be comprised of several tribal organizations within the civil service and the Oireachtas, the judiciary, and the Seanad, have become our masters.
So they flipped the pyramid upside down?
They've flipped the pyramid upside down, right? And they're denying us the right to know and denying us our fundamental rights. And by limiting our free speech, our freedom of speech, this is the first step into totalitarian, fascist control of all our rights. Because then, when you complain about the fact that your rights, your human rights, are being abused, when they want to silence you, when they bring out the Gardaí on the streets and the Gardaí harass people, the Gardaí are told to do this by what I call these civil service masters and political masters, right? So we have been asleep, and we need to wake up.
Okay, this leads us really nice into your own personal story, and we're going to talk about that in the next part. Okay, so we'll take a little bit break, people. Here, thank you for tuning into Your Rights, and we'll be back soon. Okay, welcome back, everybody. My name is Tony, and you're listening to our new show, Your Rights, which gives you the platform to get educated and also to listen to our special guests who share their own personal experience of human rights, of their fundamental rights, and many would say constitutional rights in Ireland. We're here to really provide an opportunity for you to educate our listeners and also to hear these riveting stories. And today I was honoured once again to reintroduce Patrick Clohessy. Patrick has got fantastic Irish heritage from his both parents, and he has lived in America for a few years, but he sees himself as one of us without any doubt. And he has a fantastic story. And just before the break, we talked about Pat's background, his own family. As those that have listened in, he's got a real story. He's one of us. He really is one of us. And this leads now. Well, we led into asking Pat, what does he feel is understood in Ireland by human rights? And really, in summary, it seems that a lot of people need to be educated and to understand that they have the power. And we things like Your Rights and the educations out there is to give people the power that they have the ultimate right. And we'll be talking later on about Pat's plans to be able to provide a voice for people, to give them the say and the final say, which is their fundamental right to have. Pat, we said that we would lead nicely on into your own personal story. Now, for those that are a bit weepish, I can assure you this story will touch the hardest of hearts, and it's something that I really would ask you to listen in and tune into, because this is a real story from a real man who's not only experienced it firsthand, it's affected his own nearest and dearest, his own mother and his sister especially, and he's now on a mission to educate people about this story, and that's what Your Rights is, and to help support people. And also Your Rights wants to do that, is support you in helping you to understand what are your fundamental rights living here in this country. Pat, could you tell us a little bit about the background to how you really started to experience the fundamental rights, how it's viewed or how it's not respected in Ireland through the harrowing story of your dear mother?
Yeah, well, I'd just like to say that one of the most important fundamental rights, human rights, is the right to life. And what flows from that right to life is your right to liberty. And liberty and freedom is the fountain from which all the other rights are brought forth. Freedom is the absence of restraint. Liberty is the absence of not being denied that freedom. Now, a lot of people may think about liberty as, well,
being blocked behind bars and things like that.
Yeah, or if you're detained on the street by a policeman or someone else, or whatever the situation is.
God forbid, kidnapped or something, yeah.
Yeah, but what I would say, excuse me, is, sorry, I'm getting over a slight chest infection. What I would say is there is nothing more urgent in this life than freedom. It doesn't matter whether you're in a neutral society, a left society, a communist society, a fully capitalist society, a totalitarian society. Once there is a restraint upon any of your your liberty or your freedom, your other rights are automatically, to my way of thinking, delimited. For instance, if you're in the hospital and you want to go home, and a hospital prevents you from leaving home, that's a restraint. It's a lack of freedom. If you're in the hospital and they want to give you certain drugs that you don't want to take, and they force you to take those drugs, that again comes down to restraint and freedom. If they forcibly get an order from the court to make you take those drugs, or to have them put into you coercively against your will without your consent, that then comes back to freedom. If you're stopped from listening to this program, that's a restraint on your freedom. If you that are listening to this program are stopped from speaking about it to someone else or speaking about it in public, that is a restraint on your freedom.
So it's a fundamental right.
All of your rights, life, liberty, health, welfare, happiness, they all stem from that. To me, the most basic one is life, but from life flows freedom.
Now, you experience this on your mum. I know.
And I can tell people for a fact that at the moment there are thousands of people here that are restrained and denied the freedom. Elderly people in nursing homes, and drugs are put into their food and liquids every day. Dangerous antipsychotic drugs. Some of those drugs fatal. Quetiapine, otherwise known as Seroquel. These diazepams, oxynorm patches put on them. This is what's known as chemical restraint, which is also another form of freedom, or denial of freedom. And it's another form of restraint. All these things are happening wholesale among the elderly and many people in the population that are infirm. And another example of restraint is the restraint or an absence of freedom is child and parent alienation. This is going on wholesale. We have become, people don't realize it, this present government, since the crisis that came about as a result of the other previous administration, Fianna Fáil, causing this problem with housing and so on, we have lost so many rights. People are losing their homes. People are losing the right to stay in their homes. They are being restrained. They are being evicted. All of these are human rights. They all flow from the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and also our Constitution and also the European Convention on Human Rights. And now, most recently, the Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedoms, which is now recognized as part of European Union law. And a lot of people do not realize that, in fact, cases can be brought now to the European Court of Justice if your fundamental rights are denied you under the Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedoms. There can be a reference if it is raised in the court. I have raised this in a particular case involving my mother lately. And so what I would say is people look at Article 40 of our Constitution. Article 41, which deals with the family. social policy in Article 45. All of these flow from our fundamental rights in Article 40. They likewise flow from the European Convention on Human Rights, which deals obviously with all fundamental human rights.
I want to talk, Pat. I mean, that's clearly a fountain of knowledge, and I hope people are getting some information that they can read and research, because this is all about your rights. And you touched on an area which I said we were going to elaborate on, which is your mother. And although she's in an age bracket, we're all going to age. We're all going to get older. So this is all relevant for everybody. And you've touched on obviously some of the other serious issues regarding access for parents to their children and vice versa, which we're all children at one stage, and we have many other children. Many people have their own children. So I want to talk about your amazing mother, and what a fighter she is. 97. She's had a great innings and still going, still hanging in there.
Yeah, 97. My mother was born on the 5th of October, 1922.
Wow.
And as I said, she had to stay home at an early age. She became a coming man.
She was a very strong-willed woman, wasn't she?
Yeah, they were very much mistreated by the RAC and the Black and Tans, and I can say, apart from being incensed, I was entirely outraged that Charlie Flanagan and this government should seek to honor them, because they committed the worst form of human rights violation, the genocide of the Irish people back in those days.
Mm-hmm. And your mum, your mum would be...
My mum, going on, my mother, this is hard to believe at 97 years of age, listeners, but my mother is a political prisoner.
And what do you mean by that, Pat?
She has been detained by the HSE because of the fact that we found out in 2016 when she went into hospital for a hip fracture.
Which is very common, yeah?
Yeah, hip fracture repair. Actually, what caused her to get the hip fracture was the drugs that she was taking gave her an involuntary muscle spasm. She didn't even fall down. The drugs threw her down. Okay. Right. She has a mild form of epilepsy. And
where was she before this?
She was at home, in my home.
Okay.
With me being...
Looked after
between myself and my sister lives about 10 miles away from me. So we would, take turns looking after her. We were her full-time carers.
Right.
So unfortunately that happened. She went into the hospital. And she hasn't gotten out since, because of the fact that when, after her surgery, she said, look, they're giving me the same drug. I'm afraid I'm going to fall down again. So it took her a while to gain confidence to stand up and walk, which she did in the gym in 3 days. But I had to write to them beforehand and say, look, would you stop giving her this drug that caused her to be knocked down in the first place? And they were doing that secretly. Here again, this is a violation of our human rights, right? Because it's all supposed to be done by the consent of the patient and the family. But they just totally ignore you, because the HSC is a state entity and they have a lot of power. Therefore, they're able to exert a lot of force to violate people's rights, and people will not stand up against the state. A lot of people don't even know that they can stand, but I've taken a stand because my mother asked me to take a stand.
So these are all her wishes? These are all her wishes?
These are all my mother's wishes.
Okay.
And my mother decided she wanted to leave the hospital.
When was this?
On the 23rd of June, 2016. My sister and I went in and collected her, put her in a wheelchair. She had notified them beforehand that she was leaving, because she said, look, you're not treating me here properly. I'm not
want to
getting.
go.
Yeah, I'm not getting the
Care.
rehabilitation.
We won't mention
care.
any
Yeah,
names, obviously,
yeah,
of the
yeah,
hospital. Yeah.
Yeah. So she said she signed a letter saying, "I want to come home," and that had to do with the fact that when the hospital closed for 6 weeks due to the vomiting bug, they were using her as a guinea pig for drug trials, and a nurse told us this secretly. Which, when we found out all the things that they were giving, all kinds of antipsychotics and fatal drugs, we spoke to her and she made a decision. No, I'm getting out of here. I'm going home.
So she made it very clear. And did they on what basis did they say she couldn't go home?
Oh, they said I didn't have any preparations for her when I had a complete handicap facility built. I had nurses, carers organized, a trauma counselor, physiotherapist. Everything was completely organized, and they made an excuse. Oh no, you can't go home because your son doesn't know how to take care of her and your daughter. But my sister was a licensed practical nurse carer, and she was well able. We were all well able. But the sole reason that they stopped her from leaving is that one of the nurses working there told us secretly, please don't mention my name, but your mother has been used as a guinea pig for drug trials.
Wow. And you believe that happens in for across the board in many nursing homes? It couldn't be just your mother.
Yeah, well, they have since admitted it under affidavit, what I suspected all along.
Which probably explains. I've often been very troubled seeing older people, and they look absolutely miserable, and they look zonked, and they look in a different world when you see them in hospitals.
Yeah, well, my sister and I had my mother. We exercised her every day before she was going to leave the hospital. She was in good shape. She was able to stand and
she was
so on.
Mobile enough, yeah.
Yeah. But
Sorry, Pat. Sorry, this because I'm just conscious of time because we're going to wrap up shortly for part 2, and in the final part we're going to elaborate on this and talk about what you feel is the next step for you on your mission to help your mother, yourself, and then also other people. But just your story really has got so many stories to it. I'm aware of it, but we're obviously limited in terms of the time. So in a nutshell, your mom's wishes, your fundamental wishes to be with who she wants, to have liberty to be in her own home, to refuse any of these medications if she wishes, which you would imagine is your right. We can all choose what to
no, it's not your right when you're under the HSE.
Okay, but it's our fundamental
They are
right.
the masters, and they will tell you that you will take what medicine we say you will take. You will not leave if we say you will not leave. This is total violation of human rights. And I've written to the High Commissioner in Geneva about this, and we several people, we joined together and we sent a letter, and I hand-delivered one to the Secretary General of the UN last year on the 15th of March, just before St. Patrick's Day. My mother is still a political prisoner. I have been fighting for her in the courts right up to the Supreme Court for 42 months. The Supreme Court has declared that what was done to her was wrong.
You would imagine, though, this has been done to many others, is it? Would you believe?
Yeah, there's thousands of others in the same situation.
Okay.
And people, some journalists have written articles about this on the Cork Examiner. I think Caroline O'Doherty has written an article.
About all the
thousands of people that have been made wards of court are being unlawfully detained. These people are not of unsound mind. They should not be made wards of court, right?
And it makes sense why they give them the drugs to try and make them of unsound mind, really. Is that what they're doing?
Yeah, well, what they're doing is basically the drugs are convenience. They chemically restrain the people so that they don't have to interact with them.
Yeah.
And this goes on wholesale, and it's worse in state-run nursing homes because the private nursing homes can't get away with this.
We're just going to finish, just leave that there in this part. We're going to go to a short break. Thank you for listening in and staying tuned in. I'm going to ask for Pat to continue this story and then to finish up with some of the next steps and how this all is relevant to you, the listener. We'll be back shortly. Thanks. Thank you. You're listening to Tony. I'm delighted once again to say that I have Pat Clohessy here on this new show, and Pat has been talking about his own personal harrowing case that involves his mother, who, as to use his words, he states she is a political prisoner that's been kept in a detained state against her wishes since 2016, where she beforehand had been well looked after in her home by Patrick, by his sister, and she had all the care that she needed. And sadly, due to some adverse reaction to a drug that she was prescribed and received by the HSE, she had an incident where she fell, had an issue with her hip, and although she came out of that and was mobilised again and she wanted to go home, she was basically stopped. And since 2016, Pat, has your mother ever seen the light of day outside of where she's been?
No, she's been kept a prisoner, and I've not even been allowed to see her.
You've not been allowed to see your mother since 2016?
Since the last time I saw her was on the 28th of December, 2016.
How was that possible? I mean, what happened for that to happen?
Well, my mother was in the main hospital in Cork, the regional hospital, and they forcibly transferred her into a nursing home, St. Finbar's, on the 14th of December, 2016. That was against her will. She wanted to come home or else go to a nursing home in my village, a private nursing home. But they wouldn't let her do that because they don't want my mother to get out and tell her story.
Absolutely.
As to what has been done to her. My mother has been tortured with these drugs, and
I could imagine the pain and suffering that it must be causing your mum and you and your sister, I believe, not being able to see each other.
Yeah, and because I have brought these...
highlighted these, yeah.
Yeah, highlighted this and brought legal action in the High Court first, then the Court of Appeal, and in the Supreme Court on the 17th of October. The judgment was delivered on the 17th of October, but I fought the case from the 7th, 8th, and 9th of May myself, up against 6 barristers and 6 solicitors.
You had no legal representation?
No. And I had a win, not a full win, but the Supreme Court declared that my mother was of sound mind, that she was wrongfully made a ward of court, that the process was unfair, and that I had the right, as her son, to represent her. They tried to get me excluded, the HSE and the General Solicitor for Wards. They done their very best to stop me from speaking, wanted me to take a state-sponsored legal aid team, but I was suspicious and I didn't trust that what they might do is what's known in the law as throw the case. In other words, give it to your opponent, let them win, right? I'm sure the listeners are still trying to get over this fact, Pat, and listeners, I really need you to grasp this. This is a 97-year-old woman who has brought her own children up and reared them and been there, done that with them, and they've returned the favour over the latest years when your mom needed a bit of care, and that's exactly what I would think any decent son and daughter should do if they were available to do that. So she had the care
She was stopped from going. You were fighting against, let's say, this decision. You saw really what was going on, and your mum had a very good idea what was going on, so she's very much with it. So you have not been able to see your mother for almost 4 years. How far away is she from you? How far is the nursing home from you?
14 miles.
So 14 miles.
21 kilometers, yeah.
So basically you're talking about 1 year for every 3 miles you have, if you break it down, you have not, you've basically been penalised by not going with the status quo. Is that really what you're saying?
Yeah, well, the status quo would be that I would shut up, that I would go down on knee with cap in hand begging before the Lord Chancellor of Ireland, Justice Peter Kelly, under the Crown Act.
Who's he? He's the President of the High Court, is he?
Yeah, under the Crown Act, the Lunacy Regulation Ireland Act. And go in and submit to them and be a good boy and say, I won't speak to my mother and tell her that the drugs that they're giving her are poisoning her and they're dangerous. So they therefore put these restrictions on me, stopped me from going in, and also my sister. And they even went as far as getting orders against me because I put a video up. I made a secret video of my mother being held in a locked room with a security guard and a nurse. Imagine.
A security guard for a 97-year-old
yeah,
woman.
Imagine this. And I had to sit in there with them. I couldn't have a private conversation with my mother.
Your mother had no privacy as well.
No, this is more total violation of what's known as family consortium and your right to privacy with your own family.
Wow. How do you think that's affected you emotionally, Pat, and your mom?
Well, physically, because I made this video when I was away over in the U.S. raising awareness of this issue in front of the Irish Embassy. They got an order against me about to take the video down, and YouTube said, no, there's nothing wrong with this. It's his private conversation with his mother, right? So I didn't take it down, and when I come back from the U.S., I find out they got this order for me to take it down, so I appealed against it. I went away over to Strasbourg, protesting on Women's Human Rights Day on the 6th of April, 2017. And when I got back from Strasbourg after being in Spain over Easter, they came to my home on the 3rd of May when I wasn't there, broke into it and terrorized nurse lodgers that I had in my home.
Whose day?
The Gardaí came.
Guardians of the Peace.
Yeah, they came. They broke in with guns drawn, went into these girls' rooms with guns drawn, shouting and roaring, looking for me. I was working down in my workshop and checking the post, and I come back up a half an hour later to have my breakfast, and they were all crying. And so the door had been busted in. I put a bar against it. And next thing, maybe 10, 15 minutes after I was back home, listening to the story, they're banging on the door, roaring and shouting, Garda, Garda, Garda. So I went out to the door, took the bar away from it, and opened the door, and I had a bar in my hand, and I said, raised up, I said, how dare you break in and terrorize these girls here, these nurses? One is from India, the other one is from Africa, and I can imagine.
Traumatized.
Yeah, they probably said we left our own countries because of this kind of stuff, and here it is going on. It's supposed to be a nation that upholds human rights, and they got a first-hand experience, but they even got a further experience when because I had the bar up in my hand, the guard starts yelling at me to drop the bar. And I said, how dare you come in my house? I said, get out. And the next thing, they shot me with 2 electric bullets and hauled me away to the guard station in Fermoy. I had to then be brought to a doctor and hauled up to the court before Judge Kelly, and about taking this video down and so on. And so even before I had fully agreed to take it down and give all my evidence, the guards had it taken down anyways. They had my phone and they deleted it off the phone, so it came off of YouTube.
Oh my God.
So this is what my experience of the Irish state has no respect for human rights or the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that was brought about in 1945.
Well, the thing I want to say, Bob, because your story is so harrowing, we are going to give people an opportunity, hopefully, to, if we can down the line, to respond and even write in and give their comments, because I'm sure that some people have had some good experiences, because we like to obviously be as level on a level playing field. But it sounds to me as if your story highlights a number of human rights. So many to me. I mean, it's incomprehensible, sure, for a lot of listeners. We do have to just push on to a stage which really ultimately, to summarise, your mother is. You've not seen your mother. She is still where she doesn't want to be. She was her fundamental rights to have access to her family. She's been stopped access to privacy, access to the right medication and health system, access to the people she wants, where she wants to be in her own home. They've all been violated. And although it's some people might say, Patrick, that she's 97. She's quite old, and this is what happened to old people. But that's not the point. The point is her rights and your rights as a citizen here are not being respected. True.
Yeah, well, all these orders that are being handed down are what's known as illegal orders under the Nuremberg II principles. This is the same thing that the Nazis did to the old people during World War II. And there's a famous Israeli judge, Judge Benjamin Halevi, and he says these type of orders that are being handed down in Ireland in violation of human rights, they are illegal. And above those orders should hang a black flag with the words prohibited on it, right? The worst of all is from this Supreme Court case, even that was declared that what was done to my mother was wrong, the Supreme Court now has abused its powers and made laws saying that it is okay for the HSE to detain people in the hospitals, to separate them from their families if they won't take the drugs and the treatment that the HSE wants to give, that the families will be shut out from the loved one, and they intend to put a self-appointed solicitor in place as a guardian ad litem.
What's that
Now, that means that they take over the fundamental rights of the person and the family to decide for their loved one.
Oh, my God.
So this is a cozy arrangement between the HSE, the state, and everyone else to keep people locked up and silenced so that their mistreatment, maltreatment, will not be exposed to the public. And what...
Sorry, Pat. No, I'm just conscious. I've just got a notice there that we're nearly at the end there. But just really quickly, and we may actually bring you back for another show because I think it's just your story is unbelievable, and it affects everybody at some point, and it should do. Pat, moving on, how do you feel this is going to be changed, and what have you done? What are you doing to be able to bring about that change?
Well, I've gone as far as the Supreme Court. I filed a complaint in the International Criminal Court, and I am so outraged because hundreds of people phone me or text me for advice, which I do give to people, and my time as freely as I can. But I have decided that I must stand for election in Dublin Central, the place where I know the most people, very accommodating. I help a lot of people in central Dublin that have issues that need help can't afford solicitors. And people have said to me, look, Pat, would you please stand, go forward, and let everyone know what's going on. And I am honored to say that I am standing and that I will bring up and fight for all these human rights violations and bring to the forefront and not take any prisoners with any of the TDs or any government official or anyone else. I will say it like it is, that our people are being abused. Our people should be the masters and you should be the servants.
Pat, I'm just going to finish on that. Would you like to? Have you? You've got a new site, I believe, a new website that's being readied for your campaign.
Yeah, I'm at. You can get me on patsy.ie.
Okay, and you have a Facebook, I believe, as well.
Yeah, the team that's helping me put this together at short notice, because people have heard a declaration that I read out last week on Independence Day at the Mansion House. Basically, we are operating in a lawless land. I have found out that, in fact, the Courts of Justice Act 1924 has never been commenced. And further than that, I have found out that what is being done by Judge Kelly under the Crown Act is, in essence, that we have a Crown government operating alongside our separation of powers government. This is a constitutional crisis. I have notified the Taoiseach, the chairman of the Seanad, and I've sent that notice and the declaration signed by a number of people to the president.
Okay. Well, so people, if you want to get any more information about what Pat has spoken about, you can access his website. As I said, this is all very relevant to this show. This show is all about providing a platform for Pat and many others who are just like ourselves to help educate Irish people in this locality, in the wider community, about what their fundamental rights. And ultimately, Pat, a final word from you?
Speak out, shout out. People, you have the power. Use it.
Thank you very much, people. And thank you for joining on this new show. We hope to hear you again.